All right. Well, welcome to this episode of In the Trenches.
Part two.
Part two, talking about social styles to really accelerate building relationships. But today we're going to talk about closing more jobs for technicians in the home service space. And all the way from California, I have Michael Sauer here.
Hi, everybody.
He is an expert, a coach in actually sales and relationships. So, yeah, he's all the way here in the Built for the Trades World Headquarters today.
This thing is massive.
He's just bringing some value. So today he's going to dive into really the nuts and bolts of some tools that technicians can take literally today or tomorrow and just start applying to really determining how that homeowner, the person they're communicating with, wants to be treated. So go ahead and before we dive into today's episode, he's going to share some slides that he has prepared. Go ahead and recap part one with the audience.
So in part one, we talked about social styles, and we still really didn't get into sort of what that is, but we talked about when you're interacting with a homeowner or, I mean, really just a family member, anyone, there's things that you may do. There's mirroring that we talked about. We also talked about the golden rule, again, treating others the way that you'd want to be treated. And then we even talked about the platinum rule, which is treating others the way that they would want to be treated. And at this point, really sort of my takeaways are by the end of this, again, I have a lot of information that I'm going to be providing to you, but I want you to understand how to determine someone's social style. And then once you do, I'm going to give you a grid at the end, which we can figure out how to share afterwards, that once you determine someone's social style and you look at that grid and you determine what they are, you would know exactly how to interact with one of them. And I guarantee that if you determine that a homeowner, if you're a tech and you watch this, and you apply this to the best of your ability, I guarantee that you will close more jobs because of this.
Love it, man. Love it. Yeah, it was funny. After our last episode, I went and was talking to my wife that night, and I'm like, you never believe this. Like, I just learned that there's actually a platinum rule, right? Because the golden rule is on my core values back here. Like, that was my thing. And then I told my wife, I was like, you treat others the way they want to be treated. And she's like, well, how do I know how they want to be treated? Well, here we go. Part two, we're going to dive into that. So let's go ahead and start off just sharing what you have prepared for everybody out there.
Perfect.
Oh, that's the wrong thing.
Hiding underneath there somewhere.
All right. We knew we'd get it right.
Present that bad boy. Boom. Okay. So here is the presentation that I made where really, again, I guarantee that it is how to close more jobs. Now on the right-hand side, you're gonna see a grid, which it looks a little complicated at this point. That is what the full grid of social styles looks like, but I wanted to kind of introduce that, but let's go ahead and jump right in. So we talked about last time, we talked about the golden rule. So I figured it'd be good to kind of start off to revisit it again. So Dan, question for you. Would you rather be treated the way that others would want to treat you or the way that you would want to be treated?
I definitely would want to be treated the way that I would want to be treated.
Perfect. Now, again, we talked about that is in fact the platinum rule. So how would someone treat you the way that you'd want to be treated? As far as I can determine, there's two easy steps. First is you find out how they want to be treated, and then you treat them that way.
Yeah, that's true.
So now if we're talking about others, so question for you. So talking about your wife. So how would others want to be treated? Would she want to be treated the way that you would want to treat her? Or the way that she would want to be treated?
I would have to say, so would others rather be treated this way? Definitely the way that I would say that they would want to be treated, right?
Exactly. And again, so it's just applying the platinum rule, again, from a self-focused perspective to an others-focused perspective. So how would we determine how someone else would want to be treated? Well, again, we got to find out how they want to be treated, and then we need to make that mental choice to treat them that way. Again, if I can find out how you want to be treated, I have the choice to either try to interact with you that way or not. So again, there's still they treat them that way. So as far as I can determine, there are three ways on how we can figure out how someone else wants to be treated. So the first one is, which I've seen countless times, and I know that techs try to do this, is through trial and error.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Been there, done that before. Yes. Yes.
So for trial and error, it's you try to mirror, you try sort of every sales book, every technique you can think of where, okay, well, oftentimes the golden rule, well, this is how I'd want to be talked to. So I'm going to talk to that person this way. So for trial and error, how successful would you say that is? What percentage would you say that is in talking to someone or treating someone the way that they'd want to be treated?
I would have to say 50-50 maybe.
Good guess. So it's about 25%.
Wow.
So,
wow.
so through trial and error, if someone is unfamiliar with these techniques, it works about 25% of the time, and I'm going to explain that later. The second thing is you just ask them.
I'm going to stop you
Yeah,
here.
sure.
I'm thinking about I'm thinking about my moment in front of a customer as a technician, and just that glassy-eyed look that you get from the person where they're just like staring at you, and you finally realize that you just talked to yourself probably out of a sale. Yeah, but you just talked way too much to where they're thinking about like what's for dinner.
Yes.
Or I got to go back to work. So if you're watching this and you've experienced that, then these are the tools that you need to apply to avoid that.
That's 75% of the time that you got the glassy. Now, again, it's the simple thing with this. Again, it's if you find out how someone wants to be treated and you just treat them or talk to them that way, they're going to be like, that's my person. We're the same person. And again, whether you become instantaneous friends like us, or you wind up just closing a deal, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that as a tech, you're closing more jobs. Your closing rate goes up.
It's that know, like, and trust factor. We're just accelerating that.
Exactly. Now, the second thing is you can try and ask them, but if you were to ask me, or if I were to ask you, well, how do you want to be treated? Or if a tech goes into an establishment or a house and says, dear homeowner, how do you want me to communicate with you? That's not really a professional thing. So we want to make sure that all techs approach this in a professional manner.
You want me to be direct or indirect with you?
Exactly.
That's going to be good.
So really, that's where social styles comes in. So I say, let's just jump right in. Social styles. So great question probably everyone asks is, how do you determine someone's social style? Well, you just need to ask 2 questions and then answer those 2 questions. And then once you do, you're going to figure out which quadrant they're in.
Now, keep in mind, you're not asking the customer this. You're asking yourself internally. Okay, so just full disclosure there.
I appreciate that. This is an analysis that you're going to be doing, and we're going to be going over the things that you're going to be looking for. And the great thing about this is it doesn't really matter the words that are coming out of someone's mouth. It's the things that they're saying and the things that they're doing, but it's how they're doing it. So the very first question is, are they more indirect where they tend to ask more, or are they more direct where they tend to tell more? And here are some observable behaviors that I think everyone should kind of take a look at. These are the ones that I look at when I'm first determining someone's social style of whether or not they're indirect or direct. So let's just look at the very first checkbox on the indirect. So the very first question, again, you'd ask in your head is, do they tend to move more slowly and deliberately, or on the more direct side, do they tend to move more rapidly? So as a tech, you're going to ring the doorbell. Someone's going to open up the door. Immediately, you're going to start to determine, okay, is this person tend to move more slowly and deliberately, or they tend to move more rapidly? Now, again, it's more often than not. It's 51% of the time. So there may be times you're talking to a homeowner that they're kind of moving slowly. And there may be times that they're moving more quickly, but the majority of the time, 51% of the time or more, they're going to be acting one of those ways. So then I go ahead and I check a checkbox, again, in my head or maybe on my clipboard. So let's just say I determine that they move more rapidly.
Okay, so we have somebody who's more direct.
So then I may go on to onto the next one to determine, do they tend to speak more slowly and more softly, or they tend to speak more quickly, more intensely, and often more loudly? Let's say, again, I determine that they're direct. I do that checkbox. Maybe I stop at that point and I go, for purposes of my quick analysis, I'm going to determine that they're direct.
Okay.
So I've answered my first question. Are they more indirect or direct? I've determined that they're more direct. So then there's the second question. Are they more contained or open? Well, what does that mean? Again, there's more observable behaviors for you to take a look at, things that they're saying or doing. Now, again, notice so far we haven't talked about, it doesn't matter the words that are coming out of their mouth. It's how they say them or how they do them. So looking at someone that's more contained, someone that's on the top part of the graph, they tend to limit their use of gestures, or someone that's below the line, do they tend to gesture more frequently?
Okay.
So again, it's more often than not, they tend to gesture more frequently, or they tend not to. And then the second one, or let's jump down to the third one. That's probably a good one. Do they use less facial expressiveness or more facial expressiveness? No. So here's a good example. You ask someone, a tech walks into a house, sir or ma'am, how's your day going? She might go, having the best day of my life. And you go, okay, is she joking? Like, I don't really know. But so in that instance, I would say that someone is probably using less facial expressiveness. Now, again, even though they said they're having the best day of their lives, it was very contained, as opposed to someone that's more open may go, I'm having the best day of my life.
Yeah.
So again, you just sort of determine that. Now let's just say for the very first question, I determined someone's direct. So let's just say for the second one, for simplicity, I just determined they're contained. So now I have their direct and contained. What does that mean? Now we're going to look at that graph that we talked about on the very, very intro slide. So looking at this, along the x-axis, the horizontal axis, you can see that indirect is on the left-hand side and direct is on the right-hand side. So we determined for this scenario that someone's direct.
Okay.
So just knowing that answer, we're going to know that they're one of the two on the right-hand side. And the words that are used here don't really matter. So don't worry that it says driver, expressive.
Okay.
But just know they're either in the upper right quadrant or they're in the lower right quadrant.
Okay.
So that's direct. Now we answer the second question, which is they're contained. So if someone's contained, you can see that that means that they're either in the upper left quadrant or the upper right quadrant. And then you just look where the overlap is.
Okay.
So here they're contained and they're direct. So for purposes of this, we go, that person's a driver.
So they want results.
So that white language is the number one most important thing to them. And you'll even see above the two on the top, it says business first.
Okay.
So if you determine that someone is contained, even if you just answer that one question, this is actually a good takeaway. Even if you just ask the first question, are they more contained or open? If you determine that a prospect is more contained or a homeowner is more contained, go business first.
Okay.
But if you determine that they're more open, like more facial expressiveness, then it's how's the weather, how's the kids, and you do
a little more small talk.
Yep, and you do the personal stuff first. Now notice it says first. So you still might do personal first with someone that's more open, but then eventually you do need to get down to business.
Okay.
So now that we've determined that someone fits within one of these quadrants, now what? So now this is the grid that I was talking about earlier. So this is how we're actually going to be ending this episode. And again, I realize I'm throwing a ton of info at you, but I was trying to kind of burn through this as quickly as possible. But let's just use the driver as an example. So to answer our two questions, I said that they were contained and they were direct. So I looked at that grid before, they were a driver. Now what does that mean? So if I look in the driver column, the very first thing that you mentioned is their interpersonal priority. So that second one is results. So they want to walk away with something tangible, something with results. So then if you go down to the prefers if you are, they want you to be as efficient as possible. Why? Because a driver's time is money for a driver. They want you to be efficient. They want their results and they're business first because then they want to get on to other things. Some of the questions that they may ask are what? So they want to know what? What's wrong with my water heater? What are you going to do? What are my options? There's a lot of what questions. And then for decisions, this is the most effective thing that you need to realize. So again, if you're talking to a driver in a business first perspective, you're efficient, you realize that they just want results. And if you give them options, oh, you can have this type of water heater, or you can have a tankless water heater, and you just let them sit on it.
Yeah.
Just that's going to result in you closing more jobs. So I realize I'm just taking this one of those, but there's 4 of them. Again, I appreciate you taking the time, but hopefully that's good enough for the second episode.
This is really great information, and I'm just picturing the audience out there. We have some people who love details,
yes,
and we have some people whose eyes went glassy as you started presenting
I'm
slides. So for the people whose eyes went glassy as we started presenting slides, maybe it's a technician out there who's like, yeah, this is whatever, this is cool stuff, but I kind of got my own thing going on. I don't really want to try anything new. But is there any like baby steps that people can take to start applying this? What would you recommend between this part 2 episode and our next episode that you challenge people out there to start doing?
So I'd love to challenge everybody to just go back, and again, maybe we can figure out how to provide it as a document or in the links below. Pick one of those 2 questions. So again, to determine someone's social style, it's direct or indirect or open and contained. And then it's simply just observing people, observing your family members, observing homeowners, observing fellow employees or manager. And go back and just pick one thing. So for example, on the contained or open, the less facial expressiveness or more facial expressiveness, just pick that one thing and start observing people. And then you're going to start figuring out a scale of, okay, I now have an idea of someone that uses a lot of facial expressiveness and someone that doesn't really use a lot. I feel good with that answer, and then pick the next one and practice. And the more you practice, the faster it's going to become, the faster you're going to be able to pick someone's social style, the faster you're going to be able to interact with them and talk to them the way that they want to be talked to, the more jobs and the more money you're going to make.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here first on In the Trenches. There is actually a platinum rule, and we're learning right alongside with Michael here. Michael, thanks for being on the show. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment, and we'd be happy to get you more information if you want to dive in with your own team. Really, these episodes are just to bring value directly to the home service business owner. So once again, thank you all for tuning in, and hope you have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Dan.